that path does not allow for reinvention or pivoting or constructive criticism or anything. It really is just, this is the line, don't veer outside of this path. And that's how you get it done. That's how you make a name for yourself. That's how you see success or find success, which I think you and I can now attest that that is absolutely bogus, right? Success for me has come from the mistakes that I've made. The things that I've done where at the time I was just experimenting or I wondered hey, I wonder if this is possible. Let me see if I can do it. Fail 5 times, get it on the 6th time or 60th. And, now all of a sudden there's something you can do that no one else can.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com.
People can do amazing things, walk on the moon, contain a nuclear meltdown. And what do they have in common? They're not in it alone.
Creativity, talent, genius, it's all a team sport.
We have seen what we thought was unseeable.
It was a step in a direction that nobody had taken before.
I'm Gabriella Cowperthwaite, host of Teamistry. It's an original podcast from Atlassian, all about the chemistry of teams. Check it out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen.
Gareth, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks so much for having me, Srini.
Yeah, so this is long overdue. You and I have been very, very good friends for a long time now. Funny enough, we've known each other for 20 years, but we only became really good friends in the last 4 or 5 years, to the point where I was the best man at your wedding. And I have gotten to see a really, really interesting progression and evolution with all the things that you have been up to and kind of where you landed today. But before we get there, I want to start by asking, what did your parents do for a living, and how did that end up shaping and influence the choices that you made throughout your life and your career?
That's a great question. My mom was a grade school teacher. She taught kindergarten and for many years. She's now retired. And my dad, who is now also retired, was in a middle management role for a long time before he finally started to make the big ladder climbs into upper management. So VP of operations, I think, some highfalutin title is where he wrapped things up before he retired.
Yeah. What, if any, impact did that have on you and the choices you end up making? Like, what did your mom teach you about education as a byproduct of being a teacher?
Yeah, here's the tough thing about growing up in academia. And I know that, your dad obviously is a professor too, but I'm sure it's like kind of night and day compared to kindergarten to, college level, right? But there was a lot of pressure in my family to get an education. And in some ways, I think that kind of grates against entrepreneurship, because part of me wishes that I was starting out trying things earlier. But I learned to be very risk averse from my mother. She tends to be a worrier. And I think that, that is visible in her career choice, right? Working for, the district and having that nice, secure pension and all that. So in some ways, I guess I really rebelled. And I think that they probably don't even fully understand what I do today.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can relate. I think most parents who are parents of, kids who are entrepreneurs, they do something as long as they, aren't begging me for money. But I think that it's interesting. You did rebel against that. So it makes me wonder, how you overcome an environment in which you're being constantly fed this message to be risk averse. And I've known you long enough to know that you're the polar opposite of risk averse.
Wow. I don't know if that's a compliment or not. I mean, I guess here's my philosophy on this. I'm willing to try something and see if it works, where I feel like a lot of other people they think themselves out of it before they even get to do something, right? Yeah. And I'm willing to totally roll up my sleeves and say, hey, I think this might be a cool idea. I'm going to give it a shot. Mm-hmm. Right. And then and make small bets. And I mean, I think that that's a recurring theme if you're to, I'm sure we'll get to it, right? But talk about all the different things. But yeah, I mean, taking small bets and seeing if they pay off. You don't have to go all in and totally jump into the deep end to know if something's going to work or not.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things that really kind of brought us back together is that you and I are sort of really like, literally like put the poster children for lives that haven't gone according to plan. And that's putting it mildly, I think. But
Sure.
Where I want to talk about this specifically with you is coming out of high school, you had this incredibly, really devastating accident that really, I think, derailed sort of where you were headed and what you had planned. And you and I have talked about this, kind of on and off, but never in a lot of detail. I mean, when you experience something like that in your life, particularly at that young an age, how does something like that shape your perception of what kinds of choices you're going to make about your life going forward? In other words, what did you decide then about how you were going to live your life from that point forward?
Man, yeah. So I guess a little backstory first. Yeah, as you mentioned, I was in a pretty nasty accident. It was a car accident. And I had exploratory surgery on my abdomen because although I was wearing a seatbelt, I was in the back seat and it was an older car. So it was just a lap belt. So you can imagine, and well, long story short, this guy hopped over the center median, ran straight headlong into us. It was over 100 mile an hour head-on collision, both speeds combined. So there was a lot of impact right on my abdomen. Thank goodness I was in really good shape in those days. And that led to a pretty, tough surgery and recovery and all of that. And I had hoped to go to the United States Air Force Academy and, be a lieutenant and fly planes. And I had this, romantic idea of what my Top Gun-like life would look like. But that was just dashed, right? Those dreams were, just demolished at that point. And, I did well in school academically, but it really did set me into a bit of a tailspin for a while, and I didn't know how to get out of it. But, you talk about how to put the pieces back together and how that shapes your life from there. I think the reality is it teaches you that life is fleeting, right? Because we all of us, I was with several friends in this car accident. All of us had to rally and figure out how to put one foot in front of the other again, and in some cases, quite literally learn to walk again. So it was a good experience looking back on it because it taught me a couple things. One, who my friends are. Two, that life is fleeting. And three, that, it's possible to pick yourself up from the dirt and get going again. And I think that that's something that, we don't get taught in school.
No, definitely not. I mean, school is all about an outcome, and it's kind of, you're given sort of binary outcomes, either A's or F's. Yeah.
Right. And there's no grade for resilience. I mean, do you remember in elementary school when they do the, here are the awards at the end of the year, and there's always the award for most improved. Like that, that award always made me roll my eyes when I was a kid. I was like, oh, good for you. You didn't get it the first time. Way to stick with it. And but now as an adult, I'm like, that's the award that everybody should be going for, right? Yeah. Like that's the one that tells you what the character of a person is. So
wow. So, you were so young when that happened. We're both, we're both like, I'm, about to be 42 in 2 days. And, you're probably coming up on 40 if that's the case.
That's right.
And I wonder over the course of your life, how your perception of that experience has changed and evolved, because the way you described it now sounds to me the way somebody who was about to be 40 would describe it. And I wonder, is like that the way you saw it then?
No. I mean, at the time, you're absolutely right. I mean, hindsight is 20/20, right? So I can look back at it now and I can tell you what happened or why I'm grateful for the experience. But at the time, I was devastated because I had a life plan that got totally derailed, and I didn't know what was going to come next. I wound up. So let's put it this way, man. I had over a 4.0 graduating from high school. I was, very strong academically and very strong in my extracurriculars. And I should have gone to, whatever college I wanted to, within reason. Right. And because I didn't have a backup plan and I didn't expect a car accident, I wound up going to community college for the first 2 years, which was a massive blow to my overinflated ego. I mean, you at least went to Berkeley, right? I was going to community college and it was not where I saw myself,
Yeah.
So it was really hard. It's like I lost my identity because all of a sudden it's like, who am I? What do I stand for? I don't even know what I'm doing anymore, because, flying planes was no longer in the cards.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk more about this whole identity shift of being sort of this person who is the top of your class and then ending up at community college, because I think that when we were in school, I think pretty unanimously it was kind of like, oh, you really fucked up because you ended up at community college,
right?
Which is anything but true. I think, when I remember by the third year at Berkeley, or I would see these people come in from junior colleges and they would have the highest GPAs. And they would just know how to navigate the dynamic of being in college. Whereas, I totally botched my college experience because it was like all this freedom that I'd never had before. But what I wonder is, I really appreciate that you brought up this sort of overinflated ego, because, you think about it, like that is the overinflated ego that our own parents instilled in us. It's like, you're smart. Smart people don't go to community college. They go to Berkeley or they go to the Air Force Academy.
Right.
How do you resolve that sort of ego dissolution that happens without feeling like, oh God, I'm such a loser? Like, how did you recover your sense of identity, I guess, is really where I'm trying to go with that.
It honestly, it took me a lot of years. It took me a long time to kind of pick up the pieces and start to believe that I could do stuff again, And if you look at my grades in community college, they reflect that. I think I had like B's when I used to be an A student. And, again, not to come off as arrogant, but, the reality is I could have flown through those courses if I just went to school and did my work. Like they were easier than what I was doing in high school. Right. But I just didn't know how to play the game. And that's really what school comes down to, right? It's like color within the lines, play the game, get the grade, get the diploma, get the job.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you. I encourage my daughter today to explore community college as a viable option. But our parents are the ones who told us, whether consciously or otherwise, community college is for suckers. You guys don't belong there.
So we know a lot of you have been listening to us for years, and it means the world to us. What we do here at the Unmistakable Creative wouldn't be possible without the support of our listeners. If the podcast has been valuable to you, one of the best ways you can support us is to subscribe to Unmistakable Creative Prime, which gives you access to transcripts, all of our courses, monthly coaching calls, live chats with our guests, and an incredible community of creatives. And it costs less than you spend on a cup of coffee every month. For the school teachers and people in our education system, Prime is completely free to help you with this transition to teaching online. We've packed it with a ton of value and actionable content, and we hope you'll check it out. Just go to unmistakablecreative.com/prime to learn more. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/prime.
Well, our parents and our friends. Our peer groups, both our peer groups, were smart to say the least. The people in my peer group who went to Berkeley were the dumbest ones of all.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, similar for me, right? My friends became very accomplished and went and did amazing things and went to good schools, quote unquote, good schools. Right. So I was definitely the one from my peer group who was like, supposed to go get supposed to have this life plan. Right. And they got totally derailed, and it was like, oh, poor guy. He really missed the boat.
So what misperceptions do you think that we both were raised with as a byproduct of the fact that we were taught to, go there, about the types of people who go to community college? And, what illusions did you realize that you had been kind of led to believe as a byproduct of the messages that we got?
It's funny you ask that, because this still happens today. Like my last corporate job, the CFO that I didn't report directly to him, but he was over my boss, asked me, when we were getting to know each other, so where'd you go to school? And I just thought, how archaic a question is that, bro? like, does it matter? I really don't know that it does. But to your point, we were taught both by our parents and our peer group that success meant a certain path, right? And that path does not allow for reinvention or pivoting or or constructive criticism or anything. It really is just, this is the line. Don't veer outside of this path. And that's how you get it done. That's how you make a name for yourself. That's how you see success or find success. Which I think you and I can now attest that is absolutely bogus, right? Success for me has come from the mistakes that I've made. The things that I've done where at the time I was just experimenting, or I wondered, like, hey, I wonder if this is possible. Let me see if I can do it. Fail 5 times, get it on the 6th time or 60th. And, now all of a sudden there's something you can do that no one else can or can't do well or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
We don't get taught that it's okay to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The funny thing is that when we talk about this, like they call some people beauty snobs. I think deep down, I think you and I still have this cognitive bias, even though you and I can have this conversation, where we say this, because my roommate will basically joke with me about this. He's like, you basically think this person has more credibility because they're a doctor. And I was like, yeah, to be honest, I kind of do.
Right.
But
right. Well,
it was like, and he's like, you basically, it's like, you'll swipe right because this girl went to a good college. I was like, yeah, I probably
there you go.
will.
I was just, that's the exact analogy I was going to use. Like, I don't think I'd have ever dated my wife if I didn't, my wife today, if she hadn't, had her master's degree, I'd have been like, no.
Which is funny, right? Because we're literally talking about the fact that that's not entirely true or valid, yet we still have that cognitive bias so deeply embedded into us. This is, I'm not necessarily expecting a correct answer to this question, but cognitive biases are so built into our world now, specifically because of the way that we consume information. How do you think about that?
I think that, and thanks for giving me some leeway here, because this is definitely not going to be a perfect answer, but I think that there are a few stages to releasing that cognitive bias. I think the first one is awareness, right? You have to be aware that this is kind of your programming. And I think that's kind of the stage that you and I are at, right? Where it's like, okay, we can talk about this. We recognize it. We don't wish it for ourselves in the long term, but we also realize that there's some underlying programming in our psyche that we haven't yet overwritten, right? And then I think the more conscious of that you are, and over time, that gets phased out more and more, and you can improve the programming, if you will, the subconscious programming, and minimize or hopefully entirely reduce or eliminate that those instances. But you make a good point, though, because in some ways there are where somebody went to school and how they performed and, what someone's job is. And, all of these things are indicators for us that tell us how someone does in life, right? Are they someone that we would get along with? Or do we have similar interests, et cetera? Mm-hmm. And I think we need to be conscious of is that we're not always, making decisions entirely based on those silly indicators, because it's really all they are is indicators, right? Yeah. There's so much more under the surface.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what happens, post community college, because again, this is anything but smooth sailing to get to where you're at. I know because I've seen a lot of the bumps in the road, but I didn't, when we reconnected after 20 years, I wasn't even aware of many of the bumps that came before we reconnected.
Yeah. So after community college, I went to university, and really it was just the local university, UC Riverside, because you and I grew up in Riverside, California, and so again, I was still just staying local, keeping it simple, and just trying to finish a degree. I started a degree in applied math, not because I was super passionate about it, but because it was a subject I was very strong in, and then got married, and we were expecting a child. So this is, all something that kind of just happened without being planned, and now found myself in that reality. So I dropped out of college to take care of our daughter. And then shortly thereafter, and this is the abridged version, shortly thereafter, my wife at the time and I separated. And she had type 1 diabetes, and I was trying to help minimize the damage that she was doing just by poorly tracking that disease while we were together. But when we separated, unfortunately, she no longer managed that disease very well on her own, and she passed away. So this happened in 2006. So my daughter at the time was not yet 3 years old, and basically became a full-time dad. And so I decided then and there, I was, for a living, I was bartending at, a bar called the Yard House, if you're familiar with it. I know you are. And, making a decent living, but I just had this reality check of like, hey, you're not going to be in your 20s forever. It's time to figure something out. No. This is not a long-term plan. And how are you going to ever, really provide for your kid with this career choice? So I went back to school. Because my degree in math was close to being done, I knocked it out in a year and a half, and then went into an MBA program because I was really excited about entrepreneurship. So I rolled straight into that, working full time as well, to keep the lights on. And I received a lot of support from my family, which was really helpful, and was able to bust through that MBA program and do really well from there. So
yeah.
Following that, I picked up a degree in entrepreneurship and finance.
So I think there are numerous things about this experience that are fascinating, because I think it again takes us into sort of that ego dissolution, because I think that you and I both, given our backgrounds, given the value we placed on education, given what we believed was a life plan, would be incredibly judgmental about a person who ended up in the situation that you did if it didn't happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think, how in the world did you get a woman pregnant and have a child when you're basically still a child yourself?
I would have judged the heck out of me.
Yeah, until it happened to you, which is fascinating in itself. So I want to hear, what your thoughts are on that. But this is something I remember asking you, and I knew I wanted to ask you about it here on air because I figured I'd get a much deeper answer to it. I remember calling you one day, and I don't know why we were talking about this, but I said, isn't that like the ultimate mindfuck to, have this person who clearly things are not going well with, you're in the middle of a separation. You obviously don't have great feelings toward them, but not such horrible feelings towards them that you want them to die. And then that happens, particularly the mother of your child. I mean, That is sort of like a clusterfuck of emotions, because on the one hand, you obviously were separating. On the other, this is the mother of your child that just died.
It was the strangest, like looking back, the strangest emotional, web to go through. I can just like list off I feel like a half dozen emotions at once, right? I mean, I was angry. I was heartbroken. I was confused. And then I was sitting there going, blaming myself, like, is this my fault? I could have done something, I should have done something. I shouldn't have ever left. I should have, all these things that it's so hard to go back in hindsight and start saying, this is what I should have done. This is what I shouldn't have done. But yeah, it was an absolute mess, man. And for a long time, I was just, I didn't know how to compute. In fact, I had a friend tell me, 10 years later, he said, oh yeah, we pretty much all put bets on you to, in terms of when you were going to break down. But, you kind of just picked yourself up and kept going one step at a time. And again, here's the thing, and this is hindsight speaking, but I think that car accident that I had that you already mentioned in high school, I think that was vital for my getting through this. Because if I hadn't have learned about resiliency back when I was 17, I would have been a mess when I was 25 and faced with it. So,
what were you most scared of, knowing that you were going to be a single father with, if you're a single father with a 5 or 6 year old at that point, she's able to talk at least and, communicate. I mean, you're effectively dealing with diapers.
Yeah, I was. The thing I was most afraid of, honestly, was financially providing for her, because, when you're single and, a risk taker, it's fine to say, hey, I'm happy to live in this studio while I try my SaaS company out. Right. Or I'm fine, sleeping in a bunk bed and sharing that, as a 25-year-old male, with my roommates or whatever. And, there are comforts that we're willing to deny ourselves so that we can try things out. Right.
Yeah.
And when you're a father or a mother, and especially when you're the only parent, suddenly, your reality changes. And it's like, I have to provide. And it's not just the financial, but it's also the emotional, right? You have to be there You have to spend time with your child. And it's like, how in the world can you get all of that done and still grow your life or build your life in the way that you foresaw before these circumstances?
People can do amazing things, walk on the moon, contain a nuclear meltdown. And what do they have in common? They're not in it alone.
Creativity, talent, genius, it's all a team sport.
We have seen what we thought was unseeable.
It was a step in a direction that nobody had taken before.
I'm Gabriella Cowperthwaite, host of Teamistry. It's an original podcast from Atlassian, all about the chemistry of teams. Check it out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen.
When I first started the Unmistakable Creative, I spent a lot of time emailing potential podcast guests just to get their interviews scheduled. As you might imagine, this was really inefficient, and it led to a lot of back and forth email. Fortunately, thanks to Acuity Scheduling, it doesn't have to be this way for you. Clients can quickly view your real-time availability and self-book their own appointments, and even reschedule with a click and pay online. You can collect everything you need to know about a client as soon as they book by asking clients to fill out customizable intake forms when scheduling, keeping all of their information neat and tidy in one place. Acuity actually helps prompt your clients with text and email reminders, dramatically reducing no call, no shows by accepting deposits or full upfront payments. So you can use it for clients, you can use it for podcast guests, or any other kind of meeting in which you're having to send a lot of back and forth email just to get a meeting scheduled. So save yourself from the day-to-day drudgery of having to keep up with your clients and your busy schedule by using Acuity Scheduling. And for a limited time only, you can get 45 days of Acuity Scheduling absolutely free with no credit card required by going to acuityscheduling.com/creative. Again, that's acuityscheduling.com/creative. So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable.
It's a wild thing.
Yeah. So there are several things I wonder about this. I mean, we've had conversations kind of on and off about, your relationship with your daughter. In addition to sort of wondering how you're going to provide financially, and this might be a weird question, which you may not have an answer to. I just want to hear kind of, your theory on it. What do you think the difference is between being a single mother in that situation and being a single father in that situation? Particularly because you have a daughter, and there's so many things that, only a mother could really address. The other part of this, and, again, this is one of those questions, if it feels too weird to answer, you're free to say edit. But what do you think the impact of not having her mother in her life, so early has been on your relationship with your daughter?
It's those are great questions. I think that I'm actually lucky that I had a daughter and not a son, because I think that the bond between daughter and father is a different relationship than son and father. So,
I know all
right?
too well.
I'm thinking I know how your sister and your dad are. So
yeah.
And so I think I was very lucky in that regard, because it's a different bond. I think were I female, it would have been the other way around, right? It would have been easier for me to have a son if I were a single parent. In terms of what I think about, the way that society views that, I think as a single father, I was given a lot more leeway from society than a single mother is, because assumptions are made when there's a single mother that says, she was seeing a guy who wasn't, a good guy, and, he left her and the baby, and, there are certain stigmas, right, that are associated with that.
Yeah.
But when you see a single dad, I think people go, and what led to these scenarios or this scenario? And I also think that, from a dating perspective, I think women are much more likely to date a single dad than guys are likely to date a single mom. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you. That was going to be my next question. I don't know. I mean, I've been on dates with single moms, but I can honestly tell you that as somebody who wants to have kids of my own, that was kind of always, I realized I was like, oh, I need to be honest with you that I'm, I can't see this going anywhere serious. Like, I don't want to lead this person on. And I had to be very clear about that. But that was going to be my next question was, until you met Sarah, like, how did this affect your relationships and your dating life?
Yeah. Not terribly much, to be honest with you. I think a lot of women see that as endearing and responsible, and it made me grow up in ways that positively impacted me and my personality. So it was all relatively positive. Keep in mind, by the way, at this time I'm still bartending, so there wasn't how to phrase this. There wasn't exactly a shortage of options at the time.
Right.
So
wow. Well, let's do this. Let's shift gears a little bit, because I think you and I reconnected after 20 plus years, and it was the most random thing. Why do you think that the bond between you and I has sustained? Like, what do you think that led to that? Because I mean, it got to the point where I was the best man at your wedding, and at this point in my life, I would say you're my best friend.
Yeah, no, and likewise. So for me, we're both willing to color outside the lines. And I find that that's such a difficult trait to find, especially now that we're adults. Mm-hmm. Like, how many of your previous friends, like, thinking back to, when we met, right? You're talking about everybody who went off to these great colleges, whatever. They have doubled and tripled and quadrupled down on this philosophy that you need to keep your head down and do as you're told and follow the path. And it's worked for them, right? So they probably look at you and I, and I'm making sweeping assumptions now, but I would suspect they're going to look at you and I the same way that you and I in high school would have looked at the teen pregnancy mom and judged, right? They probably look at us and go, these guys are crazy. What are they doing?
Yeah, I was living at my parents' house when we met. Yeah.
But and that's the thing, right? Like, I got the crap kicked out of me by life, man. And so did you. And so there's camaraderie in that. But the thing that you and I both did, or rather did not do, is give up, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like, sure, we could have made a ton of choices and just, stopped trying, or just, accepted whatever cards, we were dealt. But we didn't do that. Neither of us did. So that's what I think is, like, honestly, the core of our friendship.
It's funny because I think that is the beginning. And to me, the core of what this is the fact that you are the one friend who, no matter what is going on in your life, you pick up the phone when I call. You make time. And I think that I value that so much in people, because I think it's so rare. I mean, you and I were having this conversation. I said, part of the reason I ended up moving to Colorado was because you were here. Because I remember at the beginning of 2019, I was like texting you pictures of all these amazing places, and you texted back saying, great, when are you moving?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because, you started snowboarding so much in the last couple of years. I think you were seeing each other more when, here in Colorado than we were when we were both living in Southern California.
Something about living in California.
Right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, to me, that's one of those things. But the thing that I wonder, right, is you have an infant, and I still remember, like, we call you the day after, we're out partying all night. We're like, hey, what are you doing? Can we come over for lunch? And there are a lot of people who will use that as an excuse. And somehow, even despite having an infant in tow, you somehow are managing to continually make time for us, which to me, that is one of the biggest differences I've seen between you and a lot of other people when it comes to how you've maintained our friendship. Why do you think that is? Like, what is it about you that makes you that way? And why aren't more people that way?
I don't know, man. I wish I had a good answer for that. The reality is, I think that when you've gone through some of the harrowing experiences that I've had in my, young adult life, I think that you develop a perspective that time is fleeting, right? And it's so cliched to say things like, we're not promised tomorrow and all of these silly things. But hey, at the end of the day, there's reasons that those sayings exist, because, look, I mean, when you call, sometimes I'm in the middle of it and I can't pick up, but I do try to call back, right? And sometimes being in the middle of it is just like, hey, I'm about to, slay on a video game. I'm going to have to hit you in 30 minutes. Right. But other times it's actual work or something important going on. But it's just there aren't that many people in my life that I really make an effort for, because I don't think as many people have the same relationship that you and I have, right?
Well, I think that part of it is it's reciprocal, right? Like, we will always make time for each other. And I think that this is something, because I just interviewed a woman who wrote a book about the science of friendship. And so I was talking to her about this, and she said, proximity matters, she said, but also the frequency with which you contact each other matters. And I mean, you and I, even if we don't talk every day, we're text at least every other day, and we're speaking at least once a week, if not more often. Normally definitely. We were seeing each other quite frequently, but thanks to this craziness, we're not. Before we get into your business, I want to talk about the fact that you're a father for the second time, because I think it's fascinating that you've had this experience before, with an infant, and you had to do it by yourself. And now you're getting to do it with a wife in a very different life circumstance. We'll talk about the life circumstance separately. How is it different this time around? Like, what parts of this are you just like, holy shit, I have no idea what I'm doing? And what parts of it are you like, I'm a rock star, I know how to do this?
So yeah, I have a 6-month-old. She's actually 6 months today. And it is a very different upbringing for the second time around, because my eldest is now 15. So you can imagine what you've seen firsthand.
I remember the revenge. What you joked about. This is like God's way of taking advantage on you for what taking revenge on you for what a jackass you were. 3 women, all in different stages of their lives.
That's right. It's my penance right now. So, but hey, being a father is amazing. Being a father of an infant is very trying, because there's such a need for constant attention, right? As your children grow, or at least this was how it is for my first, and I imagine most people experience this, they become more independent, right? So, now she's in high school, my eldest, and she doesn't even want a hug,
So you have one with a constant need for attention, and the other is like, leave me the hell alone.
Exactly. And, it's, I guess the funny, or I wouldn't say funny, the sad part is I look at my little one now and I realize that one day she's going to be the exact same as her big sister in, 15 years from now. And it's like, in some ways it does inspire me to savor the moments where she cuddles up with me and then spits up all over my shirt.
Which I think she did that to one of my shirts too. So,
oh wow! If she didn't, then you're not part of the family, man.
Because no, I think that happened pretty much the second time I saw her. So
yeah, that's her signature move right now. So.
Yeah. Well, so one thing I wonder as a parent, I think every one of us deep down, and this is one thing, as somebody who hasn't had children yet, but clearly likes them based on all the pictures I've taken with your daughter and pretty much any other baby I've held. Like, I remember even at my last birthday, King was like, dude, you're a natural at this. We just need to get you a makeshift family.
Right.
But, I imagine at some point I'm going to have kids. And one of the things I think every one of us who has our parents says to ourselves is, I'm not going to do that because that was a disaster and you did that wrong. Have you found yourself doing things you swore you'd never thought you'd do, or saying things you never thought you'd say to either one of you? I mean, particularly with a teenager, probably it's more relevant because she's capable of having these kinds of arguments with you.
Yeah, there are definitely things, especially as you say, the teenager, she likes to push buttons, and all just the other day, of course, I mean, I sure did. I still do. So, but she's always pushing boundaries and I realize it's a teenager thing, but the hard part is, my mom had a very much like an iron fist, like, because I'm the parent, that's why, was kind of like the philosophy. And I try very hard to always have a reason for why things are. Like, why do we have this rule? Why? Because, why do we wash our hands 5 times? Because, that's what COVID-19 says to do, or whatever, right? There are rules for a reason in our household, and they don't always get followed. And it does get frustrating. And there's always that part of me that just wants to put my foot down and be like, I'm the dad, do the thing, right? I don't want to have a conversation about why, just do the thing. But I try my best not to get that way. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I try my best.
Yeah. I was going to laugh when you're like, yeah, she has a tendency to push boundaries. And I was like, well, I guess the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of the whole point of why we're, friends in some ways, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, speaking of which, let's shift gears. Let's get into, sort of the business side of this, because I think that to me, the fascinating thing is that yours really is a story of resilience, of an unwillingness to ever give up to get to the point where you're at, and to actually do things that I always thought were far below your intelligence even to get there. Because I remember when I met you, I was like, okay, cool, like interesting. All I knew is that you were smart. So that to me was the one reason I never doubted it. I questioned the ideas, but I never questioned your commitment and you as a person. But let's start there. Like, what were you up to when we first met?
Oh man, it's shameful, but I'll talk about it. It's shameful. So in hindsight, I wish I never got involved in this industry. So let me just preface with that. But I was involved in making...
Stay tuned for more in part 2 of this episode with Gareth.
Please feel free to check out our YouTube channel, YouTube/C/Gareth Pronovost, or go directly to our website, GarethPronovost.com, where we have all of our stuff up there. You can learn more about Airtable and automation and streamlining your own business and life.
Did you know that every Sunday our community manager, Milena, sends out 10 key takeaways from episodes just like this one? All you have to do to receive it is sign up for our newsletter. Just visit unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter and you'll get them delivered right to your inbox. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter.
So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable.
This is Acast Recommends. Every week we pick one of our favorite shows, and this is one we think you're going to love.
Hi, I'm Louis Theroux, documentary presenter, journalist, locked down human. And I want to tell you about my new podcast, Grounded, with Louis Theroux, from BBC Radio 4. Like you, I'm in lockdown, and so are many of those I've always wanted to talk to. So I've tracked down some famous, mysterious, and controversial guests. I want to dig deep and find out how they became who they are today. We might be far apart, but maybe we're more connected than we think.
Acast is home to the biggest podcasts from the U.S. and around the world. Subscribe to this show and hundreds more now via Acast or wherever you get your podcasts.